You are in the NGINX Controller workshop with F5 NGINX and One Technology. I am your host and Zoom chat room monitor, Matt Marlier. I am part of the F5 NGINX team. Today's partner sponsor is One Technology and Matt Brown. Some of you know him. Some of you work with One Technology. They're great F5 and NGINX partners. And you will have presenters from NGINX today, Chris Naccarato and Dominic Lucia, in regards to the content, the demo, and the workshop. Before we get started, we'd like to go ahead and have Matt Brown say a few words of welcome. Matt?
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining. See some good familiar faces and some new ones as well. So we're excited to have everybody. If there's any follow-up afterwards, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or anyone on the One Technology team, as well as Matt, Chris, and Dominic. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Excellent. Okay. A couple things on the housekeeping side before we get started, just to set expectations. So we are using Zoom webinar. All participants are muted. The way to get a hold of us and raise your hand for assistance and or help is going to be via the Zoom chat. Additionally, we will have Chris Naccarato and Dom take you through some things, but there's going to be a presentation in regards to the NGINX controller content that we're going to review. We'll introduce you to the labs environment. The lab environment is what we refer to as UDF, Universal Demo Framework. You will all be receiving an email at some point in time to log into this. If you have ever used the F5 UDF environment in the past, the password will be the same one that you have used in the past to get into that. We've found one kind of traditional gotcha in UDF accessibility for participants in the lab, and that is if you have a VPN that is on, when it comes time to get into the UDF environment, you will need to shut down your VPN to be able to access the UDF environment for the live sandbox. We'll cover these things again in a little bit, but wanted to set some expectations. With that being said, Chris Naccarato will take you through our agenda. I will stop sharing and I will come back later as your humble host and Zoom chat monitor. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Matt. As I get to my desktop here, I'll be the topics that we're going to be showing you today are NGINX history and background information of NGINX. And then we're going to do a deep dive into NGINX, what it does, what the platform entails, all the different components that you have. And then we're going to do a controller demo. And then, as Matt mentioned, we're going to get you guys set up with the lab information so you can step through that lab confidently and hopefully get through that smoothly. So with that, let's start talking about NGINX. So NGINX was a little history. It was really founded, and the genesis of it was to replace Apache due to the limitation of connectivity with Apache. Our founder, Igor Sysoyev, wrote it. It's an event-driven language, or event-driven product, so you can get a lot more throughput with NGINX. That said, if you look at this graph, you can see at some point NGINX back in late 2018 surpassed Apache as the #1 web server out there, and it's still holding that title. I think there's over 500 million instances of NGINX that have been used out there that customers and open source people have used as a web server. I want to talk a little bit about NGINX as a platform. So today's presentation is focused around the controller, but in order to understand, what we're doing with the controller, we really want to talk about what is involved with NGINX Plus and all the different things that you can do with it. A lot of people see NGINX Plus as what they call a Swiss Army knife. probably heard that term before, but we can talk a little bit about how that interacts with the controller, what the use cases are, and how we deploy that via the controller. Today's use case in the lab will really focus more on the ADC, our load balancer type of deployment, and we can talk to that as we go through here. So again, the top thing, controller. This is a control plane that will be able to deploy NGINX Plus configurations. Typically, NGINX Plus was defined by configuring files, so flat files on the operating system. The controller gives you the ability to use an API to drive those configurations, or the GUI interface in the controller. So over on the NGINX Plus side, some of the use cases we can look at are, enterprise advanced load balancing. So a lot more of the enterprise level grade load balancing features as opposed to the open source version of NGINX. API gateway, over 40% of all API gateways have NGINX in some capacity under the hood for that engine. Content cache, a lot of our customers use NGINX Plus to drive their own CDN or build their own CDN because of the content caching capabilities and the ability to have an API for that content cache. And then as a WAF. So NGINX is software. We have a lot of modules that you can use with NGINX Plus. With the WAF feature, makes it very portable because it's a very small piece of software, right? We have a couple of options there, and I will get into that as we progress here, but that's a big use case. Over to the right there, you can see application or API gateway cache load balancer. So typical use cases. And one thing to note, it's a piece of software that's cloud agnostic, and it scales very well and can be and put in many different cloud providers very easily and scaled up. So what is NGINX Plus? To dive in a little deeper, with NGINX Plus, it is a paid subscription, but what you get with that is technical support. So we do have award-winning support for that product. It's again, it's a piece of software, so we can get that going and troubleshoot it very quickly. The additional features of NGINX Plus, I mentioned the enterprise focus, things like health checks, various other things, HA capabilities that you don't get with our open source NGINX. Managed feature updates. So you will get as an NGINX Plus user, you will get quicker response for things like CVEs that come out as time goes on, and upgrades to those features. Fully tested. So again, it is fully supported and tested by the NGINX engineering team. So you get that. Certification. So it is certified on very specific operating systems. The majority of the most popular ones out there, RHEL, Ubuntu, Oracle, so forth. So proactive security updates. I mentioned CVEs. So people that have NGINX Plus are the first ones to get those updates. So documentation. So, on NGINX website, we have something called docs.nginx.com. Is a very good deep dive into the administrative actions and everything you need to know about NGINX and maintaining it and using different deployment guides and so forth. It's very good, very inclusive. So as an NGINX Plus user, customer, you have influence into the product. So that said, a lot of our customers on a daily basis are driving future advancements in the product. Things like, for example, auto scaling that I'm working with a customer on, or various different features that you perhaps have or been using, we can drive that type of influence into the product. And then compliance, right? The NGINX has quite a few different ways to keep you in compliance. Be it things like a WAF for compliance and so forth. So again, a little deeper dive into what is NGINX Plus. So with NGINX Plus, the big difference between our open source and NGINX Plus is the fact that you do have quite a bit more access to metrics. There's, as it says here, an additional 90 plus metrics. So the more we can find out about the traffic, the more we can understand the application and perhaps why an application isn't behaving properly. So with that, that type of metrics can be graphed in the controller, and I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like. But that gives you a lot more visibility into your infrastructure, into the applications. JOT authentication. So, OAuth 2. So as you, deploy your APIs, as you deploy your websites and so forth, authentication to those becomes very important. So NGINX Plus allows you to make connectivity to identity providers using JOT authentication. So it has, like it says, Open ID Connect support using JOT and other things. Active health checks, I mentioned that. That's very important, especially in ephemeral environments like Kubernetes, clusters, and so forth. As nodes go up and down, you need to be able to make sure the health of those nodes is available before you send traffic to them. Service discovery. This kind of just kind of extends the use case for Kubernetes. So as those containers go up and down, and as you add more containers, we can do DNS service discovery to understand what is available in that cluster for that application to then send traffic to it. NGINX Plus has a key value store. So one of the upsides of NGINX Plus is its programmability. So we do have some modules for a curated JavaScript, our own what we call NGINX JavaScript, and Lua. So to enable you to really get into a state where you can program very granularly, we do have a key value store. So being able to create this data source or data set and be able to program against it is very important, especially on a local instance of NGINX. So it's native to NGINX. One of the other values of the key value store with NGINX Plus is the ability to share that state across a cluster of NGINX Plus instances. So, in addition to being able to have NGINX Plus instances in an active-active or N+M active-passive type of deployment, you can share state of various things across those instances. The key value store is one of them. Other ones are things like session persistence, being able to share that state across, and rate limiting. So some value, quite a bit of value there from a load balancer or a deployment scenario. And then dynamic reconfiguration. So with NGINX Plus, we do have an upstream on-the-fly reconfiguration API that is purely in memory. So you have the ability to change all the upstreams, health checks, the nodes, add, delete, those kinds of things with NGINX Plus. Whereas with the open source, if you make a change to a configuration, you have to reload that entire configuration. I think I mentioned session persistence. This is cookie based, but there's several different ways to do that. So that's very important with the load balancing type of deployments. Next, I wanted to talk to AppProtect a little bit. So AppProtect is our latest WAF product. AppProtect is a very high performing, low footprint web application firewall that is a module on NGINX. And some of the upside to this product is that it has a declarative interface. So as you test your security footprint, and as you make changes to signatures, you have a declarative API to do that. So again, it's on the fly to change these the rule sets. It fits very well into a CI/CD pipeline. Obviously, a lot of people are moving left, more DevOps, and this is software. So again, it's very easy to deploy because it is a module. It's a very small footprint to where you can put it up in the cloud and have AppProtect or WAF capabilities in containers in your ingress controller in your Kubernetes environments as well. So it works very well with NGINX. Another thing to mention here is that if you're an F5 ASM user, the same type of signatures can be used with NGINX Plus. So you have that kind of, continuity there. So again, it can be deployed. It covers the OWASP top 10, can be deployed in containers. You can, make it very granular, have a different layer than the NGINX layer, and you have a good control over the rule set. Again, this just kind of depicts the deployment options. It can be, on your NGINX instance in a traditional on-prem load balancing solution. It could be on the API gateway. It could be on the ingress controller to control and protect Kubernetes pods as well. So very sought after product these days. Another thing to mention about AppProtect is its ability to really be almost transparent with the performance. So if you look at this, you can see the latency that you get with typical mod sec, which is just due to the way that the rule sets load and parsing through those rule sets. With NGINX AppProtect, it's quite a bit faster. So seeing a lot of upside there from a performance. As most people know that have a WAF, they know that it is very CPU driven. So with AppProtect, a lot less resources required to get a lot more throughput. All right, I'm going to focus a couple minutes here on controller. And this is where we're going to spend most of the time in the lab. So this is a good view of what the controller looks like, and how different things interact and how you would interact with the controller. So the main thing to note here is that the NGINX controller is completely decoupled from the NGINX data plane, which is down below. You can see all the different use cases I kind of talked to, but it is completely decoupled. It does connect the data plane to controller via an agent. So there is a Go agent that is on every NGINX Plus instance that talks back to the controller and feeds back all of the metrics and allows controller to push down configuration for load balancing, for API management, and security as well. Service mesh is something that is soon to be driven into controller. We do have a service mesh offering at this point, an open source offering, but visibility into that service mesh will be in controller down the line here. Some of the advantages of NGINX controller really are the ability to segment your users, or with role-based access, have centralized teams and give them self-service. So Traditionally, the infrastructure folks that own the load balancers, for example, would provision those load balancers. And any time that a user, an application owner needed access to making changes to that load balancer, they would have to put in a ticket and take time to get that taken care of for them. With the controller, it really drives that speed to deployment of an application, especially at the rate that applications are being developed these days. It gives the infrastructure folks the ability to give access to the controller to drive configuration, but with guardrails, right? So you can control the permissions for what they have access to, basically, what load balancers they can provision and what load balancers they can configure. So that is a big advantage. You'll note in the demo that I give and the lab that the interface for the controller both has an API to drive configuration, and it also has a GUI. So I spoke a little bit earlier about metrics. So all those metrics that are consumed by the controller from the NGINX Plus data plane instances can be graphed. And again, all of these views and all of these different graphs that you can create can be compartmentalized, if you will. So the people that have access can only see what applications they have visibility to, right? So with role-based access, this is all capable. So again, this references some of the security events with AppProtect. You can also get notifications of different events from AppProtect. You can see things that were rejected, various different things based on your based on your security stance or whatever that that set of rule set looks like. All right, with that, I'm going to switch over to a demo. All right, I'm going to log in. This is the interface for the NGINX controller. I'm going to log in as Peter at acmefinancial.net. So this is the same UDF that you guys will be working through with the lab. So the goal of my demo here is really to orient you to the controller. So once you get into the lab, you'll be able to see what I'm seeing here and hopefully give you a little bit more understanding out of the gate. So when you log into the controller, you see an overview of the entire NGINX Plus data plane infrastructure, right? So your entire, all of the inventory of everything that's going on, right? You can set up alerts. So alerts can be, triggered on any metric or various other things. All of the events, we kind of showed what those events are, but there are audits and all those type of events, info, debug events, many different things that you can glean from all the data that controller collects. Over in the top left, you can see that there's some pull downs, and these are the four primary sections of controller. We'll look at infrastructure first. Infrastructure basically tells you what instances are running and where you can deploy your instances. So for example, I have 3 instances of NGINX Plus, and they're located in various different places. So I can have geographical relevance to them and location affinity to them. we kind of touched on analytics. I'm not going to go into that much. You can see that in the lab. But what I really wanted to show was once you get into the lab, there are some things, and it'll step you through this, but things that I guess they come in a certain order, right? So if I was going to create a load balanced application, I would need to create an environment first. So this is basically a placeholder for all of the metadata and all the information that configuration that you would use to build that application. I would then create a gateway. And a gateway is the entry point into that application. For example, you'll see trading.acmefinancial.net and so forth. So this is the one that I'm actually going to be working with. And that gateway has placements. And this placement references an NGINX Plus instance that I'm going to be putting this configuration on. It then references the host name, right? So this is your entry point into that application for the specific gateway. And then this configuration is pushed down into the NGINX Plus instance that's defined. Also, one other thing, I did mention the GUI and I mentioned the API spec. So all of the things that we can do in the GUI will generate an API. As I make changes, you'll see they generate API configuration for those changes. So you can do it via API or the GUI. One thing I want to show here, I do have Postman running. We do have a collection of configuration. I'm not going to really get into this, but you'll see that in the lab, so you can drive that interface as well. So after we create a gateway, you can use controller for a cert repository and then assign certs to your applications as you create them. Next, you'll create an app. And in this instance, I have an app under trading application. But what I want to do, and this application is actually a Arcadia, what we call an Arcadia website, which is a sample website that is on the back end or the upstream website. This particular application sits here. And what I'm going to do for a demo is really show you how I can add very easily to the NGINX Plus instance a load balance to the actual add this particular component to this application. So coming soon, transfer. So let me do that real quick. So I'm going to come over here, add a component. I'm going to create a component. You do have the ability to create TCP or UDP components, but this particular one is a web component. I have it pre-configured, but we're going to show you how that what that looks like. It's transfer trading ACH transfers. So you can see I have that set up on my Postman as well. And then the gateway we're going to use is the trading service ones, which is the only one that's defined at this point. For a URI, we're going to say /URI or API. If you're familiar with load balancing configuration, this would just be that URI. And then the workload groups would be the upstream or the actual where the where the application lives, where it's load balanced to. And then I'm going to add a URI for that points to the upstream. I'm going to hit done. And that's the basics. You have quite a bit of other advanced things that you can change. By default, from a load balancing algorithm, we're using round robin, obviously session persistence, various other things that you can do here. But for this example, we're just going to do this, and then I'm going to submit this. And what it will do is create that component, push down that configuration to the NGINX Plus instance. So I'm going to look at this application, look at my components. You can see that this component is now configured. When I go back to my application here, you can see that my money transfer component is now added to this application. So that's a demo of NGINX Controller. I think that should be a good primer for you guys to get into the lab. Once you look at the lab, if you haven't found already, there should be a link. Let's see where that link is. It is right in the top here for you to get to the lab guide. Also, alternatively, you can get, once you're into the UDF here, if you go to Controller 1, the lab guide is also available there. So a couple different ways to get to the lab guide. All right, with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dom.
All righty, thank you much. So what we're going to do is go through just how to get logged into the UDF environment. Now, we haven't sent out those emails that will invite everyone. Those will be coming in the email that you provided for this webinar in a few moments. I'm going to take you through the first few steps on getting just logged in, and then you'll be able to log in and see exactly where to click on every step of the way. So let me share my screen here. Okay. Can you all see my screen? That doesn't have the green box around it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. And it's the UDF screen, right? I'm not accidentally sharing my other screen.
No, it's your UDF.
Perfect. Okay. So you will get an email that will ask you to register, or if you've already registered, to join this lab. When you go to UDF, what you'll see is something like this. So you were invited here by someone at F5, that's us. So you will click on this and then log in with the username and password. Now, if you just go straight to UDF and you've never registered before, it will be really confusing. So look for that email, go from the email. Don't just go straight to udf.f5.com. Look for the email from udf.f5.com. The way to access this in the most straightforward way is to just work through the jump hosts as much as possible. When you first log in, what you're going to see is just this. And this will be kind of confusing because this doesn't look like much of a lab. So the key is click up here under deployment. And this is where the world's going to open up a little bit. All of these are different virtual machines that have been assigned to you. This is your own sandbox for the day. This goes until, I believe, 10 or 10:30 p.m. Eastern tonight. So you've got some time to do this. But you can see, you've got a Windows server, some Ubuntu servers, another Windows server, and so on. Again, the jump host is the one that you really want to concentrate on. If you want to go and poke around in some of these later, you can access them through a web shell, and that'll open up a tab with just a shell here that looks like this, but you really shouldn't need to do that. I believe everything, unless Chris, you want to correct me, I believe everything is just accessible straight through the jump host. So click on access. Now your jump host might not be at the very top. For some reason, every time I launch one of these labs, my jump host is always at the top, but then sometimes it's confusing. I guess Steve Jobs has decided that scroll bars are ugly. So it's sometimes hard to tell that, hey, there's actually space down here. So you might need to scroll down to find your jump host. So go ahead and click access and then select one of these resolutions. So on PC, it won't look quite like this. On Mac, you'll be able to change this. It'll look exactly like this, but on PC, it might have your domain credentials. And obviously your domain credentials are not going to work in our lab environment. So if that's the case, then you'll have to change the user, and it's really trivial to do that. Just raise your hand and ask for help. I've also got a little helpful link on how to do it. So the password here, all the passwords are stored just under details. So what I did there is I went to jump host, clicked details, and the first one here is administrator. Okay. So now this is going to fire up into the jump host here. And this is basically half of what you need. The other half is the lab guide. So the lab guide is going to be under controller 1. So really the only two things that you need are going to be access under jump host. That's not big enough. So you'll want this guy here, and you'll want this guy here. Other than that, everything should be just, some subsection or channeled through one of these two directions. So for controller, we don't want necessarily to log into it. We can explore that in a sec, and I'll show you that in a second. But really what's key here is this will open up the lab guide. And this way I can, if I have another monitor, I can put it on another monitor. This is now a publicly accessible URL. So if you wanted to, text this to yourself or copy and paste it to a tablet or a phone or something, so you could have this open on a different screen, that's all possible. Again, there is the administrator password. And once you're in here, this first page is just the intro, but from there on, it's broken up into these really nicely defined bite-sized modules and then sub down to each lab.
Dom, would you mind dropping that URL into the chat, please?
But this is my URL. One sec here. There you go. So yeah, so that URL will work. It can't tell where I'm coming from. So, any publicly accessible client on the internet is going to be able to reach this. This is really, really well done documentation. Just next through to the first one. There's a really nice short little intro here on what you're going to do. This first module, the first lab of the first module is just about, hey, this is how we connect it to an AD controller. This is obviously super important for a lot of enterprise customers. Being able to manage users and groups on the AD side and not through our own super special authentication system, it's really nice to be able to do all of your user management in one place and then just have single sign-on into our controller. So we will hook into AD, and this is what we're going to show in this first lab. So I'm here, open the Chrome browser, get to the NGINX Controller UI, and from here on in, everything is step-by-step, click-by-click, sign in as this guy, select this menu item, and so on. If there are any questions, if anything appears a little bit off, I'm here for the duration of the time. Just let us know that you're having an issue. There are a lot of moving parts on the back end to this lab. And, this is lab infrastructure. It's on AWS, but it isn't, the most expensive, hottest, resource intensive tier of AWS. So sometimes something might start up a little slow and cause a disruption with the system, and we just have to go in and nudge something or restart something. So if you see anything that doesn't match your lab guide instructions, then just raise a flag on the Zoom chat and we'll be with you shortly. With that, what I'm going to do is now going to add everyone's names into the system. And just taking a look here, it looks like there are a few people who already have UDF logins. So you should be getting a reminder email or just an invitation to log into this lab, whereas the rest of you will get a welcome to UDF. Please, register with UDF. And again, it'll give you a temporary password. And if you just go straight to UDF, then it will confuse the system, or you won't be able to get a password. So definitely go into your email, find that password. Google's system, I know when I test this with my private email, my personal email address, Google does not categorize this as spam, or at least it hasn't in the past. So you shouldn't have to check in junk most of the time. Some systems besides Gmail might throw it into junk, but usually it does make it to your inbox. So what you're looking for is no reply at registration.udf.f5.com. And that will be the way you start. Again, yes.
Chris, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, cool. If you want to take that, Chris, I just want to say one more thing about the system. If we got your email wrong, I might have fat fingered it. I might have, not copied and pasted it correctly. So if we don't have your email, you wouldn't have gotten an invite. So if you don't have an invite by now, the email should have gone out at least a minute ago. So if you don't have your email by now and there's not a spam system, we did have one very large enterprise last week that had to go into a spam quarantine and actually release the email. So if you can't find the email, then drop us a line in the chat and we'll be able to grab the email from there and put it into the system.
All right, Dom, anything else on that? Else I'll put up the hands-on workshop time. And again, please use the Zoom chat. Like Dom said, everyone should have received an invite from UDF by now in regards to access. So first off, we want to make sure y'all get in as number one, and then we can handle any questions or help to get you going. And then we're going to be here. This is a self-paced lab. So we're going to be here to help you for the next nearly 2 hours. And we'll pop back on from time to time if there are some string of questions that seem to be documenting a trend, we'll jump on and address those. I will pop on as your host and chat room monitor about every 10 minutes, just to remind y'all that we are here to help you and move things along as needed. So with that being said, again, check your emails first. If you don't, then we're going to need to get that email from you that we can resend the link to. But that's first and foremost. Let's get you in the labs and get you cooking.
Okay, so first of all, every time somebody asks a question, I get a little nice glow inside. So I appreciate it. Somebody just sent me a question about not being able to log in. So that means that, hey, people are trying to log in, which is appreciated. So you got the email but cannot log in. One moment here. Okay, I'll try to answer your question over the chat.
The other thing for me to remind everyone of, in case you missed it earlier, is that if you have your VPN on, please turn it off. VPN being on is the #1 block to not allow you to get into UDF.